Welcome to the in-between,
where shift happens.
the moment between where we are
and where we are going.
We will ask all the questions,
Maybe find some answers.
and generally work at being okay.
In the mystery of the in-between. And for today's episode 1 of season 5, we are talking about the sacred in the struggle. The struggle is real, my friend.
Yeah.
The struggle is real. So hopefully in this conversation today, we'll maybe bring to light that there is the sacred. There are those things that we can find meaning, those things that we can find inspiration, or things that we can just find a little bit of a grip, even in those times of struggle and challenge, which it seems that we are in and have been in for a little bit. Just a little bit.
A bit.
Well, before we get started, if you're new, welcome. If you're not new, also welcome. And just so you know, the kind of the flow of the podcast is that we agree on a topic, and then one of us comes with questions for the other person, and it kind of guides the conversation. The other person doesn't really know exactly the question, so it kind of gives this raw, in the moment sort of answer, which is literally the in-between, which we find ourselves in life, right? That raw, squidgy in-between of answers and questions and all the things. So are you ready? You look ready.
Oh, I'm ready as I'm going to be. I don't know.
All right, here we go. All right, so the sacred and the struggle. So let's start off. Have you ever found or felt something sacred or meaningful within challenge, within struggle, whether it was a thought or a situation that happened within that struggle, but a time where something really meaningful showed up in a really challenging time? And what was that like for you? And how did that feel, and all the things around that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this comes up a lot, actually, for me. And this answer comes up a lot. So several years ago, my dad passed away, and it was like one of the hardest things to go through, of your life just getting turned upside down, and just trying to refigure out things, because the way I saw life all of a sudden wasn't the way it was anymore.
Right.
And it just gets you to kind of look at everything. But I think some of my hardest moments through all that, and this was months worth of can I function today? And then continued years, and I'm sure it will continue far beyond today, of just kind of reacquainting yourself with all of this stuff around us.
Yeah.
But so as challenging as that was and continues to be at times, I think some of my greatest, I hesitate to say growth, or it's those things that people are like, oh, find the gift, blah, blah. It's like, oh God,
right.
please, come on now.
Right.
But I think some of the moments I'm most appreciative of are because of that. I wouldn't have become who I am now. I wouldn't have found out the things about myself. Well, I don't know. Maybe I would have. Maybe I would have some other way. I don't know. But the way I came to find out things about myself was by processing all of that. Right. It forced me, threw me in the deep end of stuff, of a lake I didn't even know existed. To work through shit that I had glanced the surface of. And so now here we are, in the deep end, really going through it. And man, has that created a whole new world for me in a good way. I certainly, miss my dad, and that was and continues to be a really challenging thing, but it's also been one of the most pivotal life events as an adult. Is just going through all that, right? And really just walking through the muck, straight through the middle of it all, without trying to ignore it or step around it or whatever. I mean, and it almost at times felt like that, I didn't necessarily have a choice, but also I realized that like it started with a willingness to look at what was happening. Like I didn't want to bypass all of that grief or like repress any of that, so I guess there was part of me that was like, yeah, let's let's not ignore this and let's look at what's coming up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, certainly finding some of the most sacred parts of myself in some of the most challenging times. And I think I also want to say that doesn't mean we should or have to or will anytime something like just because something challenging is up for you doesn't mean like, oh, you're supposed to go and do the work and find a thing.
Right.
Like sometimes it's just hard and that's fine,
Yeah. When I think about, when I was asking this question to you, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm going to have to answer this too.
Your turn.
My turn. It's interesting. I think mine, I mean, Lord, I could look back and there'd be like lots of times, but I think the thing that just comes up immediately for me is kind of in a time that I'm still kind of like going through. Kind of over the hump, but there's kind of getting pushed by the hump, I've had a period of where I have had some really intense anxiety and really intense panic attacks and all the things that come along with that. And it's really interesting. It sucks going through that, right? I mean, it's not like, yay, this is fun. Right. But it's interesting looking back or not even looking back, but even just looking around in the current experience of it, as I began to, some of it begins to ease, that I really look back at the connection and support that I've received from a community of folks. And how it really has pulled me out of this idea that I have to, one, be ashamed or to hide the struggle or to put on whatever certain face so that no one knows or whatever, and to really lean into authenticity, lean into community, lean into asking for what I need, lean into asking for support when I need it. It's really interesting, which is all of that is like the opposite of how I would normally operate. And I think maybe the opposite of how a lot of us have been socialized to operate in this kind of like, I need to do it myself. I need to work hard and just get through it, all the things. And so it's really interesting. It has allowed me to soften around that and just be able to lean into it, the experience of discomfort, the experience of anxiety, and lean into like the support of others, which has been very uncomfortable, but is getting more and more comfortable, which is kind of cool. So it's like coming out of that experience is allowing me to see myself differently in the relation to the things around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally get that.
Which I think is sacred, right? It's sacred in the struggle. I think those are the times where we can recognize the importance of the things around us.
Yeah. Well, and don't we also really find like deep connection often in those moments?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's where, I don't know, maybe I take for granted relationships at other times. I'm sure all of us do at some time,
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly in those moments where all of a sudden it's like, oh man, this feels so important to me right now. I'm so glad I have this. I have these people to lean on, and I'm glad these people are here for me. And yeah, what a difference that makes.
What, I guess is a question for all of us, but like, what are the things that practices or spiritual or otherwise, I guess it's all spiritual, right? That you have leaned into to really help you kind of connect to those experiences, those things of meaning in the midst of challenge? Like, what are some of the, I guess, basically when things are going to shit, like, what are the things that you lean into?
Yeah.
Put it simpler, I guess.
I don't know. Is panic a practice? No.
It can be.
I guess.
I've done it very well, actually.
Yeah. Um, I find that challenging to answer. I think because my mind immediately goes to like, what are your spiritual practices?
Right.
Like we're all supposed to have some sort of like, 3-hour long morning slow roll, wake up meditation, prayer, whatever. I don't know, right? Like, I ain't got time for that. At least not 3 hours anyway. That doesn't mean I don't have like my daily routines and practices and whatever, but I guess I just have like a reaction to even just like the concept of like we're supposed to have some, like, you're not enough, or you're not really spiritual if you
Right.
don't whatever. um and so I'm saying that as much for myself as I am for anyone else out there in listener land who's like, I don't have time for spiritual practices or whatever even is that. But I have really come around to finding ways of integrating what I think would be called spiritual practice just kind of into daily life, so it doesn't feel as much of a requirement or obligation or
Like a check on
checkbox.
that.
Yeah, right. Um, and so honestly, just like taking pauses, like just take a break. Just take a break. I mean, that has been the biggest one for me. Uh, in kind of that daily grind, like in those moments of those challenges where all of a sudden things start feeling like a grind, when I realize it anyway, literally just taking a break. I mean, it could be 30 seconds, it could be 5 minutes, could be, longer, half an hour if I got the time, whatever it is. But um, that has been one of the most impactful, I guess we can call it practices, right? One of the most impactful practices that I have found as of late. I think it does a lot of things. One thing, I think it feels like there's some semblance of control in those moments where it
Right.
feels like things are out of control. So whether it is actually control or not, I don't know. I don't know that it matters, but it feels like I can make a different decision here. Like I get to choose. But I think it also just allows me to put down the defenses a little bit from feeling like I have to do the grind.
Yeah.
Like I'm at the whim of the world around me or something, right? Like I can pause and be like, no, that's not true. Actually, so I think that's kind of like on the day to day. I think, in kind of those like heavier, like really one-off kind of challenge moments. Um, I think it's usually what feels like after the fact. And I used to, like, I would respond after the fact. And I used to kind of get on myself about that. Like, man, I wish I would realize sooner and do something to interrupt this or have a practice to go to stop it or whatever. And at some point I realized that that actually started to feel like a way of trying to avoid what was actually happening. I think one of the greatest practices just going through whatever the thing is. Like just kind of letting myself process whatever the struggle is. Now, I mean, there are certainly times where, if it is like an anxiety thing, like trying to interrupt it because like that's not true. That may not actually be what's happening. That's what my
Right.
brain is telling me is happening. And yeah, that would be really nice to interrupt.
Yeah.
um, but there are certain things where it's like, this is hard because it's just something that's hard. And it may be uncomfortable, but that can be okay. And you know, it was those kind of things where I think I used to kind of beat myself up a little bit for wanting to be able to interrupt it and not remembering, right?
Right. Like,
But
oh, I
then
should have known better or should have
yeah,
whatever.
right,
Yeah.
right. But I think at some point I realized that like it was almost like my body knew better. Like my body just kind of was just like, just don't think about it, just process it, just be with it for whatever it is right now and just move through it. We can dissect it and think about it and analyze it later or
Right.
whatever. But um, yeah, so I think it's almost like it seems like a non-practice has become one of the best practices, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, that makes total sense to me because I'm the type that, like, I don't have a boom, boom, boom. Like some people have just like this is what they do every
Yeah.
whatever. I'm in the practice of just, and this is my practice, which I guess could be a non-practice, but is I just ask myself, what do I need now?
Mm.
Like, what do I need in this moment to regulate or to, ground or center, right? And it can be different things. It could be often just pausing, taking a nap, or just closing my eyes. You know,
Yeah.
going on a walk, exercising, eating a snack, drinking some water, reading, those things. And so, like, it is different things on different days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've really made a practice of trying to get in tune with myself, with my body, all the things. That way I can really process and understand what I'm going through in the moment. And then what is it that is going to be supportive?
Yeah.
And it's different, like I said, different things, different days. But I think for me, that's become my spiritual practice, if you want to call it that, but just my life practice, right? I mean, that's maybe just call them life practices. My life practice is my life hack, and that's been really supportive. And I do the same thing with eating. Like, oh, what would be supportive for me right now, right? It just depends. And so I think it's just for me that kind of brings my awareness into the present, which is, I think, the purpose of most practices that we label spiritual practices, whether the heavy hitters, the sexy ones like the meditation and the contemplation and the contemplative reading and the prayer. All of those, the purpose of all of those is to bring us back into the present moment. And so for me, just asking the question, what do I need in this moment, brings me back to this moment. Like not what I'm going to face like 5 minutes from now, or not what happened like 10 minutes ago, but like right now, what do I need?
Yeah.
And that also has been really supportive in relationships, in training my mind to ask for what I need, and then to then also ask others what they need in the moment. And so it's been really supportive in relationships, just to kind of build that present awareness and asking the questions. Yeah.
This makes me think of when I back when I was in college. I was a music performance major, and I mean, you know that.
Really? You did music?
Tell me more. But it was really common for our professors to stress the importance of practicing. And so, we would be in the practice room like hours and hours on end every day.
Right.
And super important, like really important to do that. But then it was really common for students to come out of the practice room and go right into an ensemble rehearsal and expect everything to immediately transfer from the practice room to ensemble, as if you didn't have to learn how to play with other people, right? Like playing in a practice room in a vacuum on your own is a really specific thing where you can work on really specific stuff. but it's not the same as playing with other people. And so learning how to practice so that you could bring that into a rehearsal, so that you could bring that into a performance, was like a whole other thing. So developing the skill of like being an ensemble member, like playing with other people, was a whole other concept that, yeah, it was talked about, but I don't know that people really know how to teach that well.
Yeah.
Not every teacher knows how to teach that well in music school. I'll just say that. And so very often we were kind of left up to our own devices to figure out how to, I mean, if we were even aware enough at the time to figure out what does it mean to play well in an ensemble. And I think in a lot of ways, kind of what we're talking about is that same thing, like having your, quote, spiritual practice, like your daily whatever, if you do that, can be really valuable, but it's definitely not the same as being out in the world and having skills out in the world to try and stay tethered, or to ground yourself if you're not, or whatever the thing is. Meditation is great. Love it. And how do I take meditation, or what I take away from meditation, and like lean on that when I'm out in the world?
Right.
And sometimes it's like, yeah, it's really important to just start the day like at 0, and meditation gets me at 0. It gets me to 0 to start sometimes,
or at least -5 instead of -10.
Yeah, right.
Closer to 0.
And so sometimes like that is enough. Other times it's not. So what are the skills that we have out in the world to navigate the world? Because that's certainly different than like the armchair and the reading, the contemplation, the meditation, the whatever. And it kind of sounds like that's what we're getting at a little bit, is like in the relationship, can I ask for what I need?
Yeah.
Can I recognize that for having a need, that I'm not a burden on this other person that I'm in relationship with, right? Or whatever it is, right? Like, I think those kind of skills are equally, if not more important than, the armchair spirituality practice.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think you're guiding us into the last question. It kind of this arc. It's beautiful.
Funny how that happens.
Yes. How usual.
Yeah.
What can we do, collectively, in our interactions with each other, to support ourselves through the challenging times, or just life in general, without trying to fix, and also without trying to bypass? Like, how can we support one another in community, in relationships, without trying to like say, oh, I know what you need to do in this, or, when this happened to me, or when that blah, 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 right? How can we begin to take those things, like you're saying, that we learn through our own activities that ground us or bring us to that 0? How can we then use that to support others? Or what's been your experience?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it is interesting, having not known these questions in advance. It's almost the like circling back on, it's like the other half of the conversation we just had.
Right.
Where I think if we're willing, what we can learn about ourselves in relationship with other people is what we need to take back into the practice room. Or at least for me anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm having an interaction with somebody, without beating myself up and shaming and blaming, right? Like, I can later on go kind of do some self-reflection and look at that. Like, hey, why did this happen that way? Why was I uncomfortable? Why did I say what I said? Whatever the situation was. And kind of start to look at that gently, carefully, and just become more aware of myself.
Yeah.
Then I get to show up differently. This
the
is where
next
it kind
time.
of it's a
Yeah.
feedback loop and cycles on itself. That's when I get to show up differently in relationships. Because if I'm out there going, "Ooh, you know how we can fix this? We can do this and this and this and that and the other thing." That is my, you know, coping mechanism for not liking for being uncomfortable with whatever's happening, for not being willing to let be what is. I mean, for whatever the reason, like whatever our history gave us that mechanism. Me trying to fix something, and this is probably true for anybody. If we're out there needing to fix, it's because we're not in a place where we're allowing to be what is, right? Um, so I think the more we're willing to do our practice room work and then find the tools to bring that out into the world, into our relationships, the more we can show up in relationship and let somebody else be who they are. Let the situation be what it is. And then from a grounded perspective, we can engage with whatever is or have conversation about whatever is. And if there is something that needs to be addressed or fixed or changed, because it really, like, maybe there really is something that's not working, or there's a system that's broken and the system does need to be fixed, we can talk about fixing the system without making it about me and you,
Right.
because we're not emotionally charged by whatever's going on as much as maybe we used to be, because we're just that much more and more aware of our own shit.
Well, and I think that that approach kind of sets the tone for collective, like, change and support, right? When we can come at it as looking at a situation and saying, all right, this stuff is these people are having this reaction or this behavior within this system. Okay, we can say, oh, this is something that needs to change, and then how can we move in that direction?
Yeah.
Because I think it's like, I guess the question, in my mind is like, I often can be in situations where I just want to change that person. Like, oh, if they would just change or just fix that, or, oh, why did you do it that way? Why didn't you do it this way? And I think then that when I can stop, when I get in that kind of loop of doing that, when I can stop, it's usually when I am dysregulated in myself, is when I see it everywhere else. And so it's really interesting. I do it at the house when I'm feeling really dysregulated. I'll go around and straighten things, put things in their place, and see them, like the mess or the disarray or whatever. That is the same thing that was there the other day that I didn't see. And so it's like, oh, now I can stop and say, oh, what's that about? Oh, okay, I'm feeling, this is how I'm feeling. And then I can either step into something that's going to kind of regulate how I'm feeling inside, or I can communicate that feeling like, hey, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
What can we do to work on that? It's very interesting. So I think for me, when I show up in those fix-it modes, it's more about me than what it is I'm trying to fix, which was very interesting. I think it's really important to note that in times of struggle, because we can also and challenge feel very dysregulated. And so for me, that's kind of a red flag of dysregulation. And then I can stop and say, okay, what do I need in this moment?
Yeah. And honestly, who's not feeling dysregulated?
Right.
Now,
and the same goes for trying to bypass it, or trying to ignore it, or trying to avoid it. For me, that's the same sort of situation. That's a dysregulation. And I think recognizing that and calling it what it is, and then, all right, now what's the next step that we can move past that?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing in times of challenge, struggle, disarray, dysregulation, chaos, the thing for me is to come back to myself in the moment. And I think that those questions are important ones to ask. And I think then, like you say, once we can kind of get kind of what's underlying it, kind of regulate, then we can step and make decisions and make changes from that space. And I guess kind of like a proactive instead of a reactive space. I think that's what we're talking about is, which is in times of chaos and challenge and instability, I think we all kick into that like survival mode. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of our biology and our physiology. And I think finding those things that can bring us back, help us catch a breath, even if it's just standing up and stretching. I mean, right. And then we can see the situation, have a different relationship to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why it is so important to be in some sort of, I guess what we would call community, right? Like to be amongst people who we really are there for each other.
Yeah.
You know, like no one is doing this alone.
Yeah.
I don't think we can. And I think there's such value in community because especially a community where there is an agreement that like we can show up as who we are because any given day somebody's going through it and they may show up in a way that if we weren't aware of it, we would be like, what the hell? But it's like, there's room here for us to be like, hey, I know I'm not, you know, I'm not where I want to be today and I feel off and whatever. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. No worries. We get it. And then there's room for me or you or whoever to just show up and just kind of be in whatever they're in right now and know that no one's here like, well, that asshole.
Right.
I think that's really supportive because I think so many of us go through life feeling like we can't be any certain way. Like we have to be one way all the time, everywhere. Like we can't be ourselves. We have to be put together. And so we either don't show up or we show up and blow things up.
Yeah.
And it gets real messy. But when there's room for it to be like a kind of an open space for how we are, who we are, how we're doing that day, I think that's a game changer.
Yeah.
It really is. At least it has been for me.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation and I hope that it stirred something. It stirred something in me, just a reminder of like that, you know, the sacred and the struggle, right? Is the topic. It's like that we can find meaning in everything. And then also we can lean into those things that support us in those moments and they didn't have to look a certain way, which is always, if I don't, you don't have to mold into a certain, like it can be anything. And really, I think getting in tune with ourselves, who we are and leaning into those things that support us is fabulous. And I think that is an important thing to understand that doesn't have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
It can look your way. And I think that's an important reminder in the struggle. So I appreciate this conversation. It has been comforting to me, hopefully comforting to anyone who is out there trying to find the sacred in the struggle. And knowing that we're all in this together. We're all doing the best we can in the in-between where shift happens.
Nobody really enjoys being in the in-between.
But thanks for being here anyway.
We may not have found all the answers,
But certainly some. And maybe more importantly,
a little shift has happened.
and the beauty of it all is that we are not alone in the in-between.
So until next time, we hope a lot of shift happens.